Hello, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Allison LaFerlita. I'm the Executive Director for the Nonprofit Resource Hub. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I also want to thank our panelists for coming in and sharing your expertise and answering questions for us. I really do appreciate it. For those of you that don't know about the Hub, we are an organization, an association that provides education, support, and advocacy to the nonprofit sector. We also work with our highly vetted associate members that are here to provide you with continued support and services. So if you have questions after today or you would like to have a more in-depth discussion with any of our panelists, we'll be sure to connect you with them. If you're not yet a nonprofit partner with us, it is free to join. It is an amazing resource for you. We offer not only workshops like this, but we offer webinars. We do quite a few in-person meetings as well. With the state of the way things are going right now in the nonprofit world, we are meeting more frequently. So if you have any needs that you would like for us to help you address, let us know. So today's session, it's designed to help nonprofits plan, fund, and manage construction capital projects. Whether you're doing a new build, a renovation, or an expansion, you are going to walk away with some really great knowledge from these experts in their fields. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Glenn Landau Architects. Glenn, you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. First, I just have to say I'm kind of humbled and honored to be on this very esteemed panel with these industry experts. Alex and Yvonne, I consider them friends, Allison as well. And you really couldn't have two more impressive people to give you the information or some expertise or some advice on what to do going forward. I am an architect. I'm a principal in Landau Architects. We're a third generation architectural interior design and planning firm. It was actually founded by my grandfather back in 1922. A vast majority of our projects are for non-for-profits, and they run the range from any type of healthcare facility to educational facility, community facilities, and that includes everything from service and program areas to back office areas. We have a lot of experience in dealing with the sensitivities that go along with working with the board and working with the type of funding that's necessary for a nonprofit to be successful. So I'm looking forward to a very lively discussion today.
Thanks so much. Next, we will be introducing Yvonne Foe from YPI. Yvonne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Yvonne. I am a project manager, so I'm the owner of YPI Project Management. We have a large portion of our business is to service nonprofits. We come on board really to help as an owner's representative to help you through any capital project in terms of acting as a conduit of translation for professionals like Glenn and Alex, but also to help set the budget and the schedule of the overall project.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Alex Lipsky from Lipsky Construction Management.
Thank
Alex?
you, Allison, and thank you for the kind words, guys. My feelings are the same for you guys. Are incredible resources to the nonprofit space and to the construction industry. My name is Alex Lipsky. I am the president of Lipsky Construction Management. Lipsky Construction is an award-winning, and I say that because last week it was announced that Lipsky Construction is receiving 6 top awards from the Long Island Business News, including Top Construction Firm of the Year for 2025, which we're very proud about. Lipsky Construction is a third-generation commercial construction firm providing professional construction management services throughout the New York metro area, both as an owner's rep and as a general contractor actually building the projects. These projects can range anywhere from $500,000 in scale up to an example. We're doing a great nonprofit project right here on Long Island in Nassau County, performing a $6 million gut renovation of their existing facility, working with another nonprofit in Melville, doing a $1.5 million improvement project. And we're very proud to announce that we're finishing up our project in Queens, which is a brand new ground up 57,000 square foot cold storage facility that we've been working on for the past 2 years. So beyond my work as a construction management firm, I sit on the board of directors for the HAA Long Island Builders Institute, the Boy Scouts of America, and I am a proud member of the Nonprofit Resource Hub.
And if we only all had a third of your energy, we would be in amazing shape. So, not to brag or anything, but, we only work with award-winning organization. So anyway, I just want to let our audience know you are welcome to put your questions in the chat for us, and if we can get to them, we certainly will. I'm going to try to make some time towards the end of our discussion to answer those questions, but we're gonna get going. So let's get started. So Yvonne, you are first up. What would you say are the first steps a nonprofit should take before launching a construction capital project?
Well, there's a lot. And I can say from my experience that, nonprofit partners should start early. So number one really is governance. That's really important. I think that you need to really define, select your people, assign a sounding board for what it is you're intending to achieve, just for directional purpose and decision making. You need to confirm the purpose and the mission of the project and why it's being, why you're actually embarking on a capital campaign. Aside from that, in conjunction with that, you actually need to assign a team. Depending on the project, I would say the starting team really is an architect like Glenn, a broker if you're looking to lease something or look at land use. Project manager would be important to help you get your budget and schedule together. And then shortly after, you would probably really expand the team in terms of looking at costs with people like Alex for construction costs, which is a large portion of the project.
Can I ask you actually two more questions tapped onto that? We did get a question from a participant prior to, and they wanted to know when you would actually start looking for funding.
That's really, you can break it up into, I would say, three buckets, right? The main source of funding that people can start off early with is a capital campaign. For a lot of our clients who are educationally based or are looking to further their mission, it's never too early to start up a capital campaign. You do need, a lot of people have like a set mission program to sell, but also renderings and some sort of basic program allotment to say, hey, this is what we're trying to fundraise towards. Never too early to start. I would say start early so you can fundraise to the point of like end of construction. Financing in terms of grants really can be defined by the grant that you are actually going after. Some of them we've seen that you're allowed to, put in your sort of interest into the grant very early on. Some of them are actually very similar to other more strict financing programs where you actually really need to have like a schedule of values, which really means like an itemized construction budget, as well as like a sequence and a schedule of exactly what it is you're looking to build with a pretty developed set of drawings.
And the second part of that is it sounds like you have many balls in the air when you're doing this. How far in advance do you think you should start establishing that team? Is it 12 months in advance, 6 months in advance? And it sounds like it may be in tandem with potentially looking for funding.
It's in tandem with looking at funding. It's actually also tied into the type of space that you're trying to build. If you are looking to do a new build or a major gut renovation, something of a larger scale, which is, in the value of over 4 million on change, maybe complex, you probably do want to get a head start early. Some people start about 2 years, I'd say, before the actual construction is ready to start. If it's more of like, hey, my lease is running out and I need to find a new space and it's an internal build out, you have a little bit shorter of a window to do that. So potentially like a year and a half or so out, you should be really looking at that as well.
And but before we move on to the next question, I do want to offer Glenn and Alex an opportunity to weigh in if there was anything else you wanted to add to that.
I think Yvonne pretty much touched on the most important aspects of it. It's really starting out with understanding what's the reason for the project, as Yvonne said. Are you out of space? Do you have outdated or inefficient facilities that don't meet your current programs? Do you need cosmetic upgrades? Is there a new program that you'd like to institute, but you just don't have the space for it? Do you want to expand in your geographic area or outside of your geographic area? Are there energy improvements that you need to tackle? It's understanding, as Yvonne said, what is the reason for this project, and really focus in on that and make sure that you maintain that focus throughout the course of the project.
That was great. And I think it's also important, today, the hot topic today as the greatest wealth transfer, as they call it, is happening. They always talk about succession planning. In our company, we are always talking about expansion planning. So we're never thinking, oh, I'm going to double in size in the next year, in the next 5 years, but that's a goal and an aspiration that we should all have. And you should know, if we did do that, is my existing location going to be able to fit that? Do I have to go to a different location? Am I going to have to renovate this location? So whether you're engaging with an architect or with Yvonne to build out that pro forma, you should at least have those questions in mind at your yearly review of your own company. Whether you engage on it and move forward on it, that's a separate discussion, but it is as early as possible and before early as possible.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on to our next question. Thank you all for that feedback. This one is for Glenn, and I think it's somewhat timely because, as we know, funding is getting peeled back, and our stakeholders are looking for more impact, more meaning when they are investing in something. So, Glenn, how can you ensure the project is mission-driven and provides lasting impact for your community or for the stakeholders?
It's important to engage, I believe, and this is something that we do with all of our nonprofits, and we encourage them to do, engage with all of the various stakeholder groups that are going to have a say or going to have some or be impacted by the project. The first step is to really identify who those groups are. Who are those people? And depending on the nonprofit, it could be clients, it could be patients, they could be students, they could be residents. If you're doing housing, they could be the families, could be your own staff, could be your donors, could be board members. Understand who they are. And what we always encourage our clients to do is reach out to them in the way of questionnaires and surveys that are geared specifically to each stakeholder group. We develop them in tandem with our clients. There are various ways to do it, but it really gleans a maximum amount of information by which to make sure that you're staying mission driven. And you develop questions such as, what services do they use? When do they use them? How often do they use them? What do they like or dislike about your current facilities? What works for them? What doesn't work for them? What programs or services are they participating in outside of your organization that, quite frankly, they would prefer to have within your organization? To make it either more convenient for them or because the quality of what you provide is so much greater than what they're getting outside, but there's just not an opportunity for it where you are. And then it's important to identify the available funding streams. Sometimes the funding streams don't align with those needs or desires. But you have to make a determination at some point to figure out what can we do within our operating budget to satisfy those needs. But as you know, as we go forward, it starts to form the basis of what ultimately you're going to design, what ultimately you're going to build. But what it does is it gives everyone involved a sense of authorship. It gives them a feeling that they've had a say in what it is you're doing. And now they're more committed to the cause, they're more committed to the mission. It doesn't mean you're going to give them everything that they've asked for. That doesn't happen. But they feel like they've been heard, like their voice was important, and that way they stay engaged. And it also confirms that going forward, the investment that you're making is going to be aligned with your mission, both now and in the predictable future. So for us, it's always important to do those surveys, do those questionnaires, cull the information, put it together, because you're going to find out a lot of things that you never really thought about. And we always find it interesting when people respond to these things, and we've done this many, many times with a lot of nonprofits. They find out information that they had no idea. They thought something was great, but it turns out it's actually a liability for them. Or they have a program that they're just starting out. It turns out that the demand for that program is so much higher, so much greater than they thought it was going to be. So there's a lot of information you get from it. It starts to form a roadmap of what that project is going to be and how much you're going to need to spend on it, which then informs what your funding is going to be and how much funding you're going to be needing to generate.
Thank you. So I am going to put this also out to Yvonne and Alex in terms of, stories are always great to share. Do you have any examples or stories of a project that did have an impact on the community larger than maybe they even expected? Or feedback on the question I asked Glenn?
I have a story, but it's confidential, so I can't name any entities.
What does it rhyme with?
Well, so I can talk about it as a concept. next week I will be attending a conference called Social Purpose Real Estate. And there has been a shift, probably, maybe I discovered like there was a shift. I'm calling it a shift, but maybe it was in sort of formulation for a very long time, where certain larger scale nonprofits are looking into, can we push this further? Can I build something that outreaches to a community and provides some sort of lasting mission impact that is further than just giving like a can I build and share facilities and incubate other smaller nonprofits and see if that could help in a much larger footprint than just saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to give you some money to build this, or I'll give you some money for your program. So I certainly see that shift. We have been lucky enough to study quite a few models that a lot of foundations are actually enacting the sort of mission purpose real estate. So that's been interesting to see.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with that. The more you can bring in under your umbrella, the better chance you have for funding. And Alex, do you have any feedback?
I just want to say that I don't think any nonprofit can say that they did not see the larger impact from their organization services. Last night at the Long Island Imagine Awards, we heard story after story after story of whether they decided that we're going to go into this one key sector and just go after this one specific demographic. The impact of that has been gross and felt throughout the entire area. So doing a capital project and going forward with that and accomplishing a construction project so they can start to get those feeders back into the community is exactly what this is all about.
Thank you. So Alex, you're up. You ready?
Okay, what do we
All
got?
right. What are the key scheduling milestones and how can organizations build flexibility into their timelines without losing momentum?
So when it comes to schedule, actually, I'm gonna reverse this. We always talk about cost. Cost is always the initial driver. How much is this going to cost? Is it costing too much? I often remind my clients that sometimes the time aspect is more valuable than the actual cost. For some, being able to utilize the space that they just purchased or even start receiving revenue from the space will often offset the construction costs down the line if we can get across that finish line faster. So making sure that we have our finger on the pulse of the schedule at all times is critical. And I love that question. Thank you. I think for a construction project or a development project, you could break it out into certain phases, and each phase may have a number of phases built into it, such as the pre-construction. I'm coming from the construction side, so the pre-construction phase is one big bucket in my area, but it could have a number of sub phases in it. It may have the design phase, the permitting phase, the bidding phase. But even the design phase could have not just Glenn's aspect in terms of the initial design. It could have a whole real estate portion, as Yvonne typically finds that real estate portion is something that takes a significant amount of time and energy from the entire team to find the right fit for the client. Last week, Glenn and I walked 2 spaces with a great nonprofit client. Actually, she's not even a client, just a friend, somebody that we walk the space to help out in order to find the right fit to continue her success story. And I think that's what it's all about. So you have the design phase, the permitting phase, the bidding phase, all part of this pre-construction phase. And finally, my favorite, which is the construction phase. In the construction phase, you have a lot of other different projects. You have the structural, the MEPs, the this, the that, all to make your project successful and get across that finish line. Tracking that, a qualified construction management team will create a linear Gantt chart schedule. That's Gantt, G-A-N-T, chart schedule. This schedule showcases each step of this progression, as well as its predecessors, which are required to be completed in order to move to the next step. So that's how we track the schedule from the pre-construction phase to the construction phase and the closeout phase with this critical path schedule. This theoretical schedule is your guide on how to move your project from start to completion, and also what items must be completed in order to get to that finish line.
Thank you. Yvonne, Glenn, do you want to weigh in?
Ladies first.
So I come from the budgeting world. So, but my in real world scenarios that we encounter, it's usually always about cash flow. It's programmatics and cash flow. Number one, I would say on a governance level, I got to tap it back in, make sure your mission alignments and your purpose is set and agreed upon at the outset, because major changes pre-construction will cause major delays to your project. So whether you have your steering committees or your board level or leadership or day-to-day, you have to get that all set up, and everybody has to agree that what you're building and going to build is what you want to build. And no one comes in and says, I want, broadleaf carpet when you've decided on carpet tile. The other factor really is cash flow. I think, in reality, we deal with a lot of nonprofits who, may have lost grants, or their capital campaign fell short because somebody promised money, or their grants are coming in at odd times. I think clients have to have the flexibility to learn to work with that. Certainly working with vendors who are more open and used to working with not-for-profits helps a lot. We do have clients who, ask us, like, can you defer your payment for 90 days because of this? And that usually is something that the team can work out. So I would definitely think about all that, build all your contingencies in. And especially if you're seeking financing, one of the things we realize is that if there is no asset to trade off, like you don't actually have, because we have some clients who are like, I'm leasing a space, I'm trying to get financing, and their financing partners are telling them it's not possible because you don't have any assets to hold as collateral. I would certainly have all of that sorted out early on, so you don't encounter that later on in the process, and that becomes a milestone issue.
Thank you. Glenn?
Yeah, we always look at these projects in terms of putting together the right team early on. I think, as Alex and Yvonne talked about earlier. And it's critical to make sure that you've got experienced people who are used to working on your types of facilities, that are involved from the beginning. And one of the things that we do, we're on the design side. We start from inception when there's an idea of something that needs to be done, but we're not really sure what we need to do, and go all the way through to the end of construction. And having qualified people on the team makes the job so much easier. What we generally do is, as we're developing a set of drawings, as we're developing a design, rather than waiting until everything is completed, we will bring in people like Alex and Yvonne as we're coming up with that design to say, give us an idea of what the cost is for this. Give us a rough idea of how much it's going to cost if we do this in steel, if we do this in masonry, if we do this in concrete. I'm as Alex is, I'm a third generation, and I've got all of the stories and all of the brilliant pearls of wisdom passed down to me. And one of those pearls, which actually came from my grandfather, was the guy with the dirt under his fingernails knows a lot more than you with your diploma hanging on your wall. So you have to rely on the people who are actually doing the work to tell you how it's going to work out easier. So we bring in contractors, we bring in project managers and owners reps early as we're coming up with the design to say, give us an idea. Here's a set that's 30% complete. The design, the owner is happy with the design. Here's where we are. We're about 36% complete. Give us a rough idea of what this is going to cost. Or give us a rough idea of which system we should be using, because one may be more available than the other one. What this does is it takes that time frame and consolidates it so that you're not spending a lot of time developing sets of drawings that ultimately are going to blow right through your budget. But by the time you've completed everything and you actually get pricing on the finished set, you have a pretty good idea that you've stayed within the budget, you know what it's going to be, and there are no great surprises. It really helps in terms of what the budgeting has to be, how much money you need to raise in your capital campaign, but also you're not wasting time after everything's done doing what's called value engineering, which I've always been taught is kind of a misnomer because there's little value to it. It has very little to do with engineering, but that's what they call it. When you're finished, they try and cheapen the job. I'd rather know going forward what we need to do to stay within the budget. And that's why having really good people who are experienced in doing this type of work on board early, that's why that's so important. And that's the way we like to go through these projects. It makes life a lot easier for the nonprofits that we're working with, who are usually working with constrained funds in the first place.
Thank you. Alex, do you want to weigh in?
That was my topic. I mean, we talked about schedule and kind of cascaded into this great conversation. I think Yvonne and Glenn had some really important things to talk about. It's to recap, schedule and making sure that everything is thought out ahead of time, from the budget all the way to the completion of the construction process, has to be thought out. And I think we keep saying the same things over and over again. Early, figure it out early, have contingencies so we can make it work on the back end.
Mhm. So I have a question for you, and this is kind of going off script, but I spoke with a nonprofit last night, and they were approved for a project, and they met with their architect, and they are starting to, they have 2 floors of a city building. And the second floor was, they just finished their first floor renovation. They were moving up to their second floor, and the plan was to move in sometime around 2026 to start their construction. Their concern, which she had asked me about, and I said I would bring it up, and I don't know if she was able to make today's call, because of the tariffs and now products becoming more expensive, that was not considered in their budget. So have you run into this at all? Have you had clients that have expressed concern? I know this is new for everybody, so I'm not sure if there is a recommendation that could be made, but I do think it's an important topic to at least touch on while we're all here together.
So, being in the construction hands-on part of this industry, I have my finger on the pulse, and we have a Friday meeting with our staff. We do it over a lunch, and we have a nice time. I have a really good staff right now, and team. I'm going to call them my team. And what we talked about last Friday is what we are selling to our clients is comfort, is information. But today, we need to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information of what's going on with this world. So we're constantly on the phone with Riverhead Building Supply, Beacon Building Supply, finding out what's going on in the industry. Our roofing contractors, their PVC roofing is going to be delayed on this. The electrical firms trying to find out from every single avenue of their construction project how we could be impacted over the next 6, 12, 24 months to make sure we're ready. Now, what we're seeing is that while everybody is saying we're good right now, don't worry about it, we got at least 6 months of inventory, we are seeing that the port of Seattle is completely empty. There's no transit ships coming in from China right now. So that inventory that is expected to last 6 months, that might be the totality of it. We might have a shortage after that. And not to be a heretic and hysterical about all this, but that's a realization. My wife, who is an incredible businesswoman, she works in manufacturing, and she's always explaining to me that even if the faucet gets turned on right now, where the impacts of some of these slowdowns, whether it's coming from Canada or China, wherever, if the faucet gets turned back where the tariffs go to zero, there's still 4 months of delay. The orders have already been canceled with I'll give examples of Walmart, but some of the building products, they've canceled orders. They have not, they don't want them in the ports of the US to be hit with those tariff implications. So they're just putting a pause on everything. So we're going to see cost increase go across the board for a lot of the fasteners, a lot of the electrical small components, but then we're going to start seeing delays on our switch gears. We're going to see delays on the RTUs that are coming out of Canada, the switch gears coming out of Mexico. So it's going to be a universal problem, similar to what happened in COVID, that not too many people are talking about it, but it's something that we have to think about and make sure that it's at least known and we're aware of.
Mm-hmm. And Yvonne, I have a feeling that this will be related to what you're doing as well. Have you had any clients raising questions, concerns?
We do. So we have had a shipment coming in from Amsterdam that because of all this discussion is now being delayed. Like this is months out, right? But they're like, oh, there's so much delay right now because the ships can't figure out what's going on. So people are basically standing their ships in port. It's very similar to what happened during COVID. I mean, I do think it's all really supply and demand and cost increases. So the reality is that the companies that are in the worst positions really are the ones who are probably in a construction cycle that still hasn't really bought that material yet, right? They might have put money down and that money spent and you haven't bought it yet. So I would say for new projects, when we try to estimate with some contractors like Alex, and so they would be like, we can't estimate any escalation because we have no idea what's going on. For us as the owners reps, we would just really hold a much higher percentage of potential escalation. Probably not on the overall construction volume, but maybe on specific trade lines where we think it may be hit. So that's really where we're starting to see that shift. For new projects, hold a higher contingency or talk to an owner rep. For the current projects, I think, contractually we surfaced on a private level in COVID a large scale landlord, and they made a shift in their contracts, right? So we started putting in things where it was like, hey, if I can't meet your completion date because of a COVID related delay, that's like a non-consequence. Like nobody is at fault for that, and that just we'll all work together. So I think contractually there's probably something where the lawyers will have to look into this as well, because there may be delays.
We may have to do a part 2 strictly about this. So
Yeah.
Stay tuned. And Glenn, any feedback? And then I'm going to go to some audience questions.
Yeah, it's interesting because we get asked this a lot. We've had this conversation with people in the construction industry, people who are vendors, and at this point right now, we just did a project and the numbers came in, they were around $20 million. This was an assisted living facility. And the reality is the numbers were not affected by tariffs because none of those prices have come out yet. At this point, and we asked, we were very specific, is this in anticipation of higher costs? And the answer came back, no, it's not. From that standpoint, a lot of it is expectation. Granted, what Alex talked about, what Yvonne talked about, and some of the delays in getting materials that have already been ordered, or the ports that are empty, that's going to have an impact. What we generally do to try and hedge against that, we do this anyway, but now even more so to be more focused on it, is we try and specify products that are made in the US. Now, granted, there's no such thing as a product that is 100% manufactured in any country. Every product has components that are coming from all over the world. The final assembly is taking place in the US, let's say. But to the extent that we possibly can, we're going to take a harder look at which equipment, what components we're specifying to see, are these readily available, or is this something that's coming from overseas and now we're going to get stuck? Is there an alternative that may not be any more costly and will be just as good? So it takes us, to a point where we have to spend a little bit more time, do a little bit more investigating, to make sure that, to the extent possible, we try and mitigate the risks and try and mitigate the cost increases. And, it just takes a harder eye to it, but it is possible. At the end of the day, we're all subject to, what everyone else is subject to. But we try and do the best to make it, work out best for the client.
Thank you. Yeah, and these are important questions for nonprofits to have with their boards and their funders, and this is something everybody is very well aware of. So plan ahead, and hopefully that will help save them a lot of grief. So we have a question from the audience. This is from Brian. It's, do you find that nonprofits give preferential treatment to MWBE firms, and do they have requirements? This I'll put out to all 3 of you, and whoever would like to answer, go for it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead then. You said I'm first. I would say that for some of our nonprofit clients, when they speak specific grants, there are requirements. So, for example, anything that is a grant derived from New York State requires some form of percentage cash flow to registered state MWBEs, not city. There's city and there's state. On the city basis, it's the same concept. They would typically want a percentage of the budget distributed, and there's actually a pretty heavy sort of cash flow reconciliation process that we have to submit packages in to show proof that money has flowed down through the subs. But I don't know if nonprofits themselves give preferential treatment. I wouldn't know too much about that. I think it's independent to each nonprofit.
I will weigh in and say you're 100% correct. From my experience, I have another client organization and they have a grant, and it's dictated by the funding and what the grantor wants. So if the city says a certain percentage does need to go to an MWBE, that's when it's done.
I
I've
think it's important. I
yet to meet
apologize.
an organization that says I will only work with MWBE.
I think it's important to talk about grants and construction projects a little more in depth because depending, it's something that you should know what you're getting into. Just because you received a chunk of change from the government, whether it's the local municipality or the feds or HUD or whatever it is, it may have more implications than you will actually receive. And what I mean by that is you might be restricted to use an MBE firm, which is a minority business enterprise firm. You may be required to utilize maybe 30% of your project now needs to be MBE. But with some of these federal funds, you may be required to, all of your labor may be required to be at a prevailing wage or a Davis-Bacon, which is the federal wage scale. That could increase the cost of your labor for the entire project by 40%. Now, if you're receiving, let's say, $50,000 for a grant that will make your entire labor for your project cost 40% more, I'd rather throw that grant in the garbage. It could be useless in that context. But you can be creative as well. You could take that grant and utilize it just for the management, just for Glenn's portion, just for Yvonne and myself's portion, just for the management of the project, because we're not doing any on-site labor. So there is workarounds. You have to work with your grant writers. You have to work with your great fundraisers. I know we have Mark Saffron on the call. He's a great grant writer that we work with. You got to work with them and make sure that you're utilizing the right grant for your project.
Yeah, and it also, aside from just grants, it also has to do with who is licensing the particular nonprofit. We work with a private pre-K that is under both the state education department as well as Office for Family and Children Services. And they also have a requirement that a certain percentage of their annual expenditures go to MWBE firms. So it can come from various sources, but it also can be self-imposed. There are a number of nonprofits that we work with who really don't have to answer to anyone, but themselves have decided that their policy is that a certain percentage of their expenses are going to go towards minority or women-owned businesses. In some cases, there's also what's called an SDVOB, which is a service disabled veteran-owned business. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to find. But again, it's another requirement that many of the organizations have to abide by because of the fact that they're getting funding or they're getting licensing or they're getting accreditation or whatever. And in order to comply, they've got to satisfy those mandates. And to Alex's point also, many times it does say that the work must be done under prevailing wage. And at that point, as you know, very aptly said, the cost is going to go up. And it's a requirement. And, you know, as far as the nonprofits go, sometimes you can't get around that. It's part of the capital expenditure that you have to endure in order to provide, you know, it goes into your operating budget, it goes into your expenses, it goes into the loan that you're getting, it goes into your capital campaign. But those are things that are going to be required if you're going to do a project and you happen to be under the auspices of one of these organizations.
Thank you. I feel like we can have a couple of different workshops come out of just that one question. We are going to move on to another question from the audience, which is from George. Real estate development can be extremely complicated. Who represents the nonprofits during the process? And who does all the financial and data tracking go through?
I think this depends on what sort of development you're looking at. So I have a development background prior to doing project management on the representation. I was with a mission-based developer for Johnson Rose companies. There really are several development models. Number one, are you trying to be a real estate developer? In which case, a lot of businesses and nonprofits, it's not really part of like what you do day to day. You would be a benefit to actually hire a really good owner's rep who does have a background in development. Number two, which is more of the popular route, is sort of where we have charter schools now reaching out to say, hey, I need a turnkey. This happens a lot in the education sector. I need a turnkey developer. I want somebody to just build it. Here's my program. You build it. I pay you a fee. That you really kind of need Again, also, I would recommend getting a project manager who has development experience, because their role then really is to monitor and make sure that your project is getting built on time and on budget, because I assume at some point you'll also be putting some, you'll be paying for a fee and paying for the overall capital project. It's just somebody else is building it for you. But we could take a bit like a whole session on real estate development.
Yeah, we've experienced this as well. And from the standpoint that, let's say a nonprofit is going to be taking space in a building that a developer owns or a developer is putting up. And the developer says, we're going to do the build out for you, tell us what your requirements are, and we'll take care of it for you. Sometimes that works, but what it basically means is that the nonprofit does not really have someone who is looking out for their interests, because the developer is looking at it in a way where, how can I minimize my expenditures so that the return on my investment is greater, the income that I'm going to generate from this space, from the nonprofit, is going to be much higher. And it may not actually align with the mission to the extent that it needs to, for the nonprofit. And we've been in a situation where landlord had a space, the nonprofit saw the space, it was a perfect geographic location for them. And the owner said, or the developer said, we'll take care of the design for you. I've got my in-house architect and he'll lay it out for you. The problem was that that architect had absolutely no experience designing the type of facility. This was for seniors, it was for Alzheimer's, that is necessary to understand. Really, you have to understand the population. You have to understand the sensitivities. You have to understand the operations, both from a staff point, from a family standpoint, from the client standpoint. There are varying degrees of Alzheimer's. You have to understand the sensitivities and what affects them, what sets them off, how you reinforce memory. And the architect that works with the landlord really didn't have that experience. So they just did a basic layout, which we took a look at because they brought us in because we had that experience. And we could tell right away that it did not work. So from the standpoint of protecting the nonprofit, there's nothing wrong with saying, listen, we're going to hire our architect, our engineer, our owner's rep, somebody who's going to prepare a design, somebody who's going to look out for our interests. And then once we have that design worked out for us in a way that's efficient for us, that operationally works for us, works for our clients, works for our staff, we'll then give that design over to you. You have your in-house architect prepare the construction documents and file it with the building department, and we'll have our architect just keep an eye on things and make sure that what we're getting is what we need and what works for us. So it's important that the nonprofit has someone who understands the importance of their mission, understands the codes that go into designing or developing a space that works for them, and is kind of looking out for their interests rather than the developer taking over the entire thing and having their team do it, because there's a very good chance that the nonprofit is really not going to get what they need in the end.
I think to summarize, and I have to stop Glenn for a second because he said probably one of the most important things of this entire call. There was an architect working on a project that it was one of the first times they ever interacted with that. Not every architect is the right architect for your project. Just like not every contractor is the right contractor for your project. Now we have, between Glenn, myself, and Yvonne, I know for a fact, just from my experience with them, we are all very versatile. Our portfolio is extensive. The amount of different types of projects I have worked on in my career, Glenn has worked in, Yvonne has worked in her career, we can probably provide more value to any kind of project than most firms out there. But not every architect is right for your project. Not every contractor is right for your project. In terms of tracking the real estate, tracking the capital budget, we do that. That's why you would bring in a construction manager. That's why you would bring in a program manager. We would create your capital budget with you. We would bring you to different real estate sites and value this against your budget. We would bring you to different architect firms and value that against your budget. We would create the conceptual model and value that, create a rough order of magnitude pricing study and do that against your budget. We work with you step by step along the way to make sure that your initial budget is in mind at all times. And does it need to be increased, or does the scope of work need to be decreased to stay within the constraints of your budget?
Thank you. And thank you for pointing that out in terms of working with the right people for your particular project. We have some lengthy questions here that are really great, but I'm actually going to share them with you offline so you can respond to these people directly, because they're pretty lengthy, and I want to make sure that they're able to get the attention they deserve and still ask all the questions that we need to. So Lorena and Michael, I'm going to ask you to just note that I'll get in touch with you guys offline so we can help answer your questions. I'm going to move on to our next question, which is really good for everybody to know. And this one is for Yvonne. What should nonprofits be looking out for in contracts, whether it be a lease, design, or construction, to protect themselves legally and financially?
So, wow, that's a bunch of different contracts. If it's a lease, and let's say you're leasing a space, and what's highly popular now, especially if you're building commercial office space, is for the landlord to do your build out for you. And and we represent both landlords and also tenants on our end. So we look at this both ways. If you were a tenant and you were saying, hey, you know what, my landlord's going to build this for me, my rent may be a little bit higher in the end, but I don't have to deal with this tenancy, I just have to deal with furniture, AV, IT, security, and I'm done. You're actually not done. So there is a portion of the lease that's called the work letter. The landlords, if you have a good landlord, he's going to work with you. If you have a landlord who's more like, I just need to get this done so I can start the free rent period and charge you rent, they're going to try to push the envelope in getting it completed as fast as possible. Back to Glenn's earlier statement about program making sure you get what you want, that sort of like contractual language has to be in your work letter. I would make sure that you either get an architect or an owner's rep to review those work letter standards to make sure that you don't get hit by cost implications later on. The other portion for interiors is really that sort of furniture, AV, IT security portion. A lot of people don't know that you actually have to coordinate electrical of these needs. So you can't actually just sign a lease and have the landlord start construction without really like coordinating your IT, AV, and security requirements into it. Otherwise, when you're doing it at points in construction where space is actually built and you're making changes, you're going to get large cost ramifications. So I would start all of that early and get that out of the way. That's really, and really narrow down on what you consider to be a substantially complete space for move-in. So that's something that we would really focus on in terms of an interiors leasing. For all the other contracts, I mean, it's broad range. I think in larger size projects, you really need to have a very good lawyer up front to talk about the business terms. Specifically, really, the construction agreement is the the largest cost bucket, right, Alex? So if I was negotiating with Alex, we would put in certain clauses to cap durations, to cap areas where we think you could do a valid change order to the scope, right? So some instances are if you're doing major gut renovation and the contractor has time to go see the space, you're like, look, everything that is visible that you see, even if it's not in the drawings, you're not going to charge more from. But there are certain gray areas like existing conditions, people can cover things that are hidden that open you up for cost. And for that, you just carry a contingency to cover that. So that's where I think you really need some strong protection on duration, scope, and finite schedules. Some clients do like to put in what's called liquidated damages. That's really a penalty clause. We see it with a lot of educational clients where they're like, I have to hit this date. I have to hit this date. If you miss this date every X day, if it's a commercial lease, it's like every X day is costing me, usually put in their rent value. Educational clients have to create a values they think they want to put in. And that's really between the client and the contractor to agree upon if that's really something that needs to be put in place.
Thank you. And I think this question, I'm going to tack it on and then I'm going to put it out to Glenn and Alex also, because there are clearly several pitfalls you can avoid in your contracts if you really go through them with the fine tooth comb and address what you need to address. But what would you say are the other pitfalls that our audience should be keeping an eye on for, and that can easily be avoided when not only doing the leases, but the project in and of itself?
Look,
I'll
we could do an hour on this. I could do a full hour
give me, well, you have 11 minutes till we're off.
11
So
minutes.
give me your
So
30 seconds. Highlight reel.
I am in a national peer group of construction managers and general contractors, and we always talk about how New York is one of the most litigious states. I know more about construction law than my counterparts around the nation, and that's just because I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I do this every single day of the week. A general contractor is a holder of contracts. My contractor agreement with whether it's my general contractor that I hire under me or my subcontractors that I hire under me, is 28 pages long. If you're not working with the AIA suite of documents on your owner agreements, you need to speak to me immediately. If you are signing an agreement made by somebody else, you need to contact me immediately. I was on the phone on the ride to the Imagine Wars last night. My wife was in the car with me talking with a contractor up in Massachusetts who signed her contractor's agreement, and she's asking me for help. I can only tell her you need to hire an attorney because you're more or less screwed. I will guide you on the right things to do. You could ask me advice at any time, and you put my contact information in there. Please reach out to myself, Yvonne, or Glenn at any time for friendly advice. You don't have to hire us right away. You could ask, hey, can I have some advice on how to do this? And if you like me, sure, let's go have fun together. But in that sense, let's get to the starting line point. Let's make sure you guys are set up the right way, because construction is exciting. Construction is fun. We can get to the start line and the finish line together and do it in a great, fun way. But there's a lot of things that we've learned throughout our entire career. And that's why we are proactive in our construction management. That's why we're looking at contingencies, and why we have such a depth of knowledge to make sure, whether it's construction, contract, or even in the field, day-to-day operations, how to go through step by step and do this the right way.
Thank you. Glenn, do you want to weigh in on that, Yvonne?
Well, I'd love to weigh in.
You didn't need an invitation. You could have jumped right on in.
I didn't want to be rude. Yeah, no, I actually, I've been through this so long. I actually had one of my own staff people at one time ask me whether or not I went to law school, because I was literally picking apart various things in contracts, both construction contracts, our own contracts, things that ordinarily an architect is never trained to do. But this is something that over the past almost 30 years, I've seen so many contracts and been through this so many times. What Alex said is critical, and what Yvonne said is critical. Yes, if you use the standard suite of AIA agreements, it takes a lot of the mystery out of it. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and they tend not to be onerous either on one side or the other. And it's also established case law, so that it's based upon actual findings, as opposed to some attorney who really doesn't know the difference between a painter and an architect, or a plumber and the guy who fixes your microwave, putting together a contract, trying to talk about construction when they really don't understand the language. And I've had those arguments with attorneys who have written contracts, and I try to explain to them the language that you're using doesn't mean what you think it means. So yes, you need a qualified, experienced construction attorney to help you. But at the same time, as Yvonne pointed out, there are the legal aspects of a contract and there are the business aspects of a contract. The attorney can help you with the legal aspects, but there are many parts of a contract and in a lease itself where you really want to have your architect, your project manager, your owner's rep, your contractor, somebody who understands, look at it and give you advice as to what exactly you're getting in the space, what exactly you're getting for what you're going to be paying. The attorney is not going to tell you that, but somebody who understands work letters, somebody who understands what it is. Alex and I we just went through this, again, a few days ago, where we were looking at a letter of intent for a nonprofit who was looking for space. And we were commenting on the things that they need to make sure are included in this to protect them. This is not something that an attorney is going to know. It's somebody who's in the construction field, like any one of the three of us, is going to understand, because we see it on a daily basis.
We're in the trenches. We're in the trenches together too.
Yeah, it's critical that you get somebody who understands the language and an attorney who has the sensitivities to know that they just don't know everything, but hopefully they've got the experience with construction law.
Thank you. We're closing in on our closing time, so I do want to ask two questions, hopefully, before we leave. The first one, I'm going to put this out to Alex, but everybody please weigh in if you'd like. What are the most, nope, that's not the one. I want to ask Alex, how can nonprofits use capital campaigns and naming opportunities to support fundraising for their construction projects?
That's an awesome one. That's so easy. Thank you so much. Um, we're all marketers. That's what we do for a living. We talk about our nonprofit, we talk about our for-profit, we talk about our architect firm, our general contracting firm, construction management firm, whatever we're doing. I was told by a very incredible first generation biopharmaceutical owner. I asked him, "What do you guys do here for a living?" I went to his office and he says, "I'm in marketing." And I knew he was in biopharmaceuticals. And I said, I thought you were in biopharma." He said, "If I can't sell you by the time you walk through this door, I've already lost you." So in that same sense, we always need to be thinking about marketing our company the right way. Your capital project is going to be the best fundraising campaign that you've ever had. You could provide renderings, you could provide bricks, you could provide naming rights of rooms. That's why I don't think there is, but maybe there's a Glendow wing of a university. The reason that universities do this is because it's a great capital fundraising campaign for your project, but you need to do it the right way. You need to make sure that you know what the budget is, what you're going in for, and how to make sure that it's being utilized for your company. But you also have to remember that it cannot take funds away from your operations budget. Everybody that's been donating year after year to your fund, to your company, to your organization, if they're going to spend all their money in the naming rights of a wing, then you lost their entire funding for the year. So in your capital campaign, you must write into it that it is unrestricted and it can be used for operations uses as well, to make sure that you're not just taking all the funds and it's going into just this capital project. It could be utilized to keep the lights on every single day of the week. So have a fun time fundraising it. Make sure that it's advertised, put it on LinkedIn, social media, everywhere. Make sure everybody knows about your organization the right way.
Thank you. Glenn, Yvonne?
We've been involved in this for projects that are under $100,000 in construction to projects that are $100 million in construction. And the most important thing in any fundraising or philanthropy consultant will tell you this, is to align the spaces, align the opportunities with the affinity of the particular donor, and to understand what it is gets them going, what it is drives them, what's important to them. And that's where you make the pitch. You understand what their background is, understand what their capacity is for giving, but understand where it is you're going to touch them in a way that they're going to say, I want to be part of this. And we put together lists of all of the available opportunities. It's basically, if it's not on wheels, and sometimes even if it is on wheels, it's going to have a naming gift associated with it. And we work with the development directors to put together those lists, understand what the cost of those spaces are, and then figure out what the giving opportunity is, because it's not just the cost of the space. If you're just doing that, then all you're doing is paying for the space. You're looking for that plus, you're looking for twice that amount or 3 times that amount. And Yvonne, I'm sure you've been through this as well with many of your non-for-profit clients. You know, there's an art to how you put together a capital campaign like this.
Yeah, I would add that for those, as soon as you have, let's say, a schematic design drawing of some form of plan, that is really when, you know, our clients get started, right? When I talk about putting governance down, typically there may be an entire steering committee designated to it. It's like fundraising, donor campaign. What can we name? Who should we outreach to? And there's actually even more specialized branding consultants that can really bring sort of the graphic component to that space of designing donor walls. And they work hand in hand with the architect to really make that happen. We've done that, like I've done that on past projects, which were more culturally centered, such as the Dimena Center of Music, and then naming like rehearsal rooms. But, we're seeing that now on larger scale and smaller scale projects. When I did Planned Parenthood's headquarters, they hired a group called Pentagram to do both a donor wall, and they found space, like a stairwell, right? It's like a common stairwell. They're like, well, let's bring some history in, and we'll take like our timeline, our historic timeline, and they used it not just to generate income, but also to bring some sort of timeless value and component to their space that reiterates their mission. And they can use it for, let's say, social media purposes or any sort of interviews they're having. So it's actually very, very important, I think, for nonprofits to take that step early to look into a capital campaign with specific spaces.
Well, thank you. It's 1 o'clock, and I'm so sorry to have to cut this off, but we're going to get pushed out of the room. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank Glenn, Yvonne, Alex, so much for your expertise. You're going to be getting some questions emailed to you afterwards. I believe that you all have our contact information. If you have any questions about the hub or from any of our panelists today directly, you have their contact information. Please continue to join us. I came up with 3 more workshops that we could do. So if you have any questions, let us know. And again, I want to thank all of you. And if you have any last words you'd like to say, you can close it out.
Thank you all so much. It's been fantastic speaking with Glenn and Yvonne and Allison. You're an incredible resource for all of the
Thank you.
nonprofit space. Good to
Thank
see a
you,
lot
thank
of my
you.
friends on the panel as well and the attendees. Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. Please stay in touch with us if you have any questions.
Thanks, everyone. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
the opportunity.